In one of the full moons in the cold and terrible prison of Drax sat a girl to whom the guards came with an important person who immediately said that he needed help from her. He immediately realized that this was her only way out, obediently agreed to the proposal, and offered her services. This man said he wanted to become emperor. She was surprised she didn't understand what was required of her, thinking he was plotting a rebellion or worse. The Hexen Empire already has a current emperor and a crown prince ready to ascend the throne. The younger brother of the current emperor is third in line to the throne. He comes right after the prince and his brother, despite the fact that he is facing two strong challengers. He also realizes that he can get rid of them quite easily, but needed help. The girl laughingly asked, as if knowing the answer, that it was definitely the great duke in front of her. He embarrassedly replied that it seemed that rumors about him had already reached her. Otherwise, she would not have laughed in his face. She retorted that there were no such people who had not heard of him. An invulnerable beast of a frontiersman, Akka, the black wolf of the battlefield, the might of the empire, and the disgrace of the Hexen imperial family, who even has a brain made up of muscle, Rex Van Hesse. In someone as aggressive and brutal as him, you won't see an ounce of elegance and restraint inherent in members of the imperial family. Even if you put on rose-colored glasses, actions rather than wordplay, brutality rather than law. Even though he was a nobleman, no woman would risk asking him to marry, and on top of that, the now-deceased emperor had entrusted him with the borderlands of the empire, the land of Drax in the cold north, a subtle hint that he belonged only among the wild beasts. Nothing more than an attempt to throw the source of shame out of the imperial family. However, Rexed was indeed doing his best to do his job, since the borderlands of the Empire, which were under the strict supervision of the Grand Duke, had never been invaded. The girl thought that the man in front of her had no chance of becoming emperor. In its history, this world had never known such non-material leaders, especially those who had nothing but power. Leaders were clever and cunning. They got everything they wanted just by opening their mouths a few times. Duke was sure she knew he had the wind in his head, to which she agreed, adding that it was still empty. But he paid no attention and continued the topic he had come to her on. He needed her to work her head in his place, hinting that she had something else in there, putting a finger to his temple, thus teasing her. She only now realized why the Duke had come to her, and the only thing she didn't understand was how he could help him become a great emperor. But in response, she heard that he didn't care what kind of life she had led before, but he did remark that she was surprisingly bright and intelligent. But she said that was a rumor and an exaggeration, but he didn't care. She had to make him emperor. Either she agrees or she dies, because she is condemned to death for stealing, to which she agreed that he was right, going on to say that if she is taken out, she will do her best. She said that even though her talents were trifling, she would do what she could to help His Highness. The Duke was pleased with this, and liked it to go so smoothly, and said that he would personally see that she was richly rewarded if all went well. He also said that if she wished, he would give her her own lands, and provide her with so much money that she could live the rest of her life in luxury, to which she thanked him. He said he would take her away at dawn, not as a prisoner sentenced to death, but as his tactic. She would leave this prison with honor, to which she thanked him with a smile. The protagonist thought she had lost her mind, and she also thought she was sorry to admit it. That he's an idiot. He may have a brain, but somehow it turns out he'd be better off without it. She wondered how he with a head like that even thought to find her. Surprisingly smart of him to approach her. But she's sure that's where his intelligence ends. Why waste time with someone the Emperor disliked? But she can't just sit around and wait for the execution. So she should go after him, at least for now, she thought. She continued to think, and as she did, she also noticed that this monologue with herself was too depressing. For starters, she pretended to be arrested, and she'd entered Drax's prison, and she'd done so quite deliberately. And then she similarly plans at dawn to escape. The main character in the past, or rather from her past life, lived in a completely different world. There she tried everything she could: an assistant at a prestigious university, a financial manager, an employee of an insurance company, a secretary to the chairman of a huge company, a used car salesman, and so on. All these jobs had something in common. Each of them involved fraud. Her first scam in life was to fake an application to a prestigious university. The reason was simple. She was just interested in student life. After that, she pulled all sorts of scams, big and small. Eventually, she became a first-class con artist, and her wanted ads were all over the country, and yet the government was too stupid, short-sighted, and helpless in their attempts to catch her. With a small set of cosmetics and the ability to manage her status, she lived like a con artist, leaving no trace, under the name of a financial manager who arrives married to the chairman of a large company. A mansion, expensive cars, jewelry. She just bathed in luxury. Her fraudulent life had everything, but she got tired of it. She secretly sold part of the shares to the chairman under her own name. Then she used the proceeds to sail across the sea and find shelter. She was going to start a new life, but then she got a taste of the first one gone. People tend to overlook the fact that murder is a simple thing. For the chairman of a corporation who are above all laws, that's where she miscalculated, and that's where her short life of only 28 years was cut short by the efforts of the assassins sent by an angry man from the corporation. The main character came out of her memories and didn't even want to remember her death. But that's the price of parasitizing someone else. So she humbly accepted death, and when she opened her eyes, she was already in another world. If I had been born into a wealthy family, I wouldn't have had to go back to the life of a con artist. But she remembered wandering the streets in the rain with nothing. She remembered that she was a cheater in her past life, but she had a conscience. She only exploited bad people who did evil things. However, she is grateful that she at least has a memory of her past life, and she is also glad that her resourceful head is still with her. So, after the reincarnation of the main character, she became a con artist again, and she is 21 again. The world in which she was reborn was very different from her past. It reminded her of the Western Middle Ages, and although their study of science did not go far, it was compensated by magic. It should be noted that human life by the standards of my world here was almost worthless. If a peasant without money or power committed a crime, he was executed on the spot. But despite the difficulties, being a criminal here is even more interesting. If you have enough money, to get useful magical tools for their scams is easy. The main character has been slowly preparing herself to make a name for herself and become the most famous rogue already in this world. She learned the local customs, studied the etiquette of nobles, learned how to make self-defense potions, capitalized on her cosmetic skills from her past life, and constantly changed her identity throughout. Then she started saving the money she got from her scams. And at this point, she had reached the status of a first-class criminal, a death row inmate known as the Faceless Con Artist. Funny how her wanted poster has no face on it. But the people of the Empire were horrified when they heard her name. But there was an unwritten agreement on her title of Genius of the Art of Deception. Would the Grand Duke himself visit her in prison to ask the criminal to become his tactician? If he had a choice, saying she would have to help him, she was even curious if she could turn this shallow individual into an emperor. But that was the end of it. Unfortunately, she wasn't the type to waste time on meaningless nonsense that wasn't worth a dime. Finally, it was time to escape, she thought. She had an hour and a half before the next guard passed through here. That should be enough. The devices used throughout the prison are mostly made of an alloy containing a huge amount of a metal called Halomen. Sheep Halomen is easy to get and has a low melting point, so if she holds it for a while, it will become the shape she needs. So she made the key, thinking how easy it is to escape from the prison, and now high-risk prisoners are kept in solitary confinement with no toilet. So she had to use this hole in the field. But thanks to the pumping system connected to the cell of every high-risk prisoner, her escape becomes real. Morning, 7 before noon, noon, evening, 9 in the afternoon. At this time, water is pumped into the pipes to flush out the feces. She needs to escape before 7 o'clock if she doesn't want to drown in feces after saying goodbye to Draxa prison. She was about to jump into the hole, but suddenly remembered, turning around, she said goodbye to the Grand Duke, wishing him to become emperor as he wanted them and to rule long and idle. The most wanted criminal in the Hexen Empire, Viper. She was given this name because of her talents in handling poisons and her unrivaled success in the art of deception. The Duke thought of the protagonist and said, although she was a bit arrogant, he liked her eyes, thinking that who would have thought that under the guise of a glitch was a young girl who was probably just a child. He turned around and asked his subordinate if she was as smart as they say, to which she replied that she was, and also noting that she had been wanted for disorderly conduct in the Empire for 4 years. It was the butler Owen Schwatch. The Duke continued to ponder. He said that since she was so fond of money, she would work hard if we offered a good sum. To which the butler replied that he thought so, but only if we could offer her more than she gets out of her scams. However, if you take her with you, never trust her, you can trust anyone in this world, but not a Viper. To which the Duke said not to repeat it again, as he understood, but the butler said he was worried about his personality and tendency to turn a blind eye to the actions of those you consider your people. He went on to say how bad she was, when suddenly they came to a cage where there were many guards standing, and they did not understand how she could escape. They tried to tell him, but he himself looked in and saw that she was not there, and the cage into the sewer was open. He angrily demanded what had happened here. They said that the Viper had escaped. The Duke ordered the butler to find out how she had escaped and report back to him. And it had better not be because she had snatched a key from one of the guards, glaring angrily at them. But Owen stopped him, telling him not to jump to conclusions, showing a melted fork, and it looked like that was what she had made the key out of, which was probably how she had opened the shackles and the drain grate. He accepted the fact that she hadn't stolen the key, but he wanted to hear an explanation how the glitch had gotten the cutlery. That was a big question. How could someone steal sharp utensils, given that there were magical metal detectors all over the building? And then the guard said that he had checked, and there was no problem with the detector. And then the Duke asked if she had passed through it yesterday. He hesitated, hesitating at the answer, remembering. Yesterday, when she went into the canteen, she was scared because of the detector that went off. And then immediately the guard asked what she had there. But she said what he was talking about. There was no way she could have brought something through the detector. So why try? And she completely forgot that she had a spoon in her head to put her hair in a bun. She apologized for that. And she completely forgot that she had stabbed it with a spoon. He thought that if she was trying to steal something, she would have taken a fork or a knife, but not a spoon. He told her to be more careful next time. He went on to prove to the Duke that he was sure he had taken the spoon from her, and there was no way she could give it back. It looked like she had put the spoon in her hair on purpose to distract the guards. If she was 100 times a tick, there was no way she could have gotten past the working metal detector without disabling it first, the butler said. She hid the fork she had decided to put away somewhere on her body and tricked the guards by spooning her hair to put the alarm on her. The Duke laughed out loud, saying she was really something, like the butler said. She wasn't someone who was going to put up with the idea of being executed soon. To which he nodded his head. But he is still curious about something else. Why the Viper was caught exactly in his lands. She conducted her activities so carefully that her identity could not be established for 4 years. And then suddenly all the guards kneeled down and asked to execute them. He, surprised, did not understand what was happening. And they said that the treasure of His Majesty was stolen from the safe in the basement. And he immediately said angrily about his ring, the blue mineral symbolizes the noble family of the imperial family, Elfer. Every time a member of the imperial family is born, they are given a ring or bracelet trimmed with Elfer. The fact that it is impossible to lose such treasures is obvious. The imperial family values these gifts as much as their lives. They give them various magical powers and hide them in the most unexpected places. But now such a gift has disappeared, to which the butler realized that she had come here for the treasure of the imperial family. The reason she revealed her identity was because she needed to get into Drax's prison. The Viper had deliberately allowed himself to be caught so that he could be brought here to the ring. And then the Duke said he never would have thought. The butler asked if he had listened to what he was saying, to which he nodded his head, and the latter said that if he hadn't prepared protective measures, it would have been terrible, an enchantment that keeps the slaves from escaping. Using poison made from the master's blood is the principle of the bond between owner and slave. The moment the owner activates the enchantment, the slave is in terrible pain. He instinctively goes back to where his master is. There must be trust between the employer and the employee. If you treat it like a slave, going so far as to use enchantments on it, then what is the chance that the Viper will trust and help him? To which the butler replied that he is so worried about other people's rights, and not even to say that during wars, he killed hundreds of soldiers personally, to which the butler replied that it is different. He understood that very well, but alas, there was nothing more they could do. The Viper would never join them unless we forced it. He was sure of it. Even if they were lucky enough to catch it again, it would just find another way to escape. But the Duke looked at his hand from the spell, and saying he didn't want to go that far, he applied the spell. The main character is walking through the woods at this moment, looking at the ring she recently stole from the Duke. She thinks how beautiful it is, and soon she will run away with it straight to Eisenbach, a place that thrives on selling the magical stones they mine. Now that she has an imperial treasure, her next legend will be Bastard Child of the Hexen Empire. Then she will secretly contact the royal family of Eisenbach and reveal her identity to them. She can imagine the look on the Grand Duke's face when he realizes the ring is gone. Suddenly, she falls to the ground in terrible pain. She doesn't know what's going on. She thinks it's a poison, most likely paralysis-inducing slate or Peraltin. Slate is a type of paralyzing poison that causes immediate death when consumed, has a unique odor, and Peraltin is a paralyzing poison that also causes death when consumed, a rare poisonous plant. But the protagonist should not die for sure. She has developed a resistance to poisons by consuming them in small doses. But she didn't understand when she could have been poisoned by something. She thinks the poison was put in the food they gave her in prison, colorless and tasteless. She didn't notice anything, and the food didn't have a specific smell. So it's definitely not chiffon. But if it is Peraltan, her body would soon be permanently paralyzed and she would barely be able to blink normally. Suddenly, she realized that her body was moving on its own, and when would the pain stop when suddenly she saw the Duke's feet in front of her, who immediately asked where she was going. She was shocked to see him in front of her, and then he continued talking. He said that you should have suspected something was wrong when they grabbed you so easily, but the Duke is not a man who likes to think ahead. So he didn't expect this. And he said that who would have thought that the Viper's motive was the imperial treasure, to which she laughed. The Duke said he didn't think she had stolen it just because of its beauty. He was wondering what else she might need it for, and said she could keep it, at which she was very surprised. And she said that if he lost the imperial treasure, he would be in trouble, to which he replied that it didn't matter, for now she would always be by his side, just as the ring on you as well as her belonged to him from now on. To which she said indignantly, why should he? But he replied that he wasn't as heartless as people thought he was, and it was just awful to watch her little body shudder in agony. But she silently just pondered, and she now realized what the poison was. It was all Rex's plan, waiting for her to escape, and he was more careful than she thought, telling him that from such a dose she could have died. But he approached her and took her by the chin and said that she would not die from such a dose, adding that if someone with your talents were to die so soon, it would be a great loss, as she was a genius at deception, calling her a viper. And he also repeated that he needed to become emperor, no matter what the cost. She wondered if he had a different motive, and even though he knew he didn't have the talent to rule the empire, why he was so eager to cause trouble for the imperial family. And then he went on to say, while the protagonist pondered, that if she followed him, he would promise to give her anything she asked for, and he added that it was an offer. He apologized, but in this country, those on death row have little choice, and holding out his hand, he says she wanted to live, she would do as he said. Instead of dying and letting her magnificent brain go to waste, it would be better to benefit them both and work for him, to which she held out her hand and thus agreed. He thought about how hot it was right now and added to that, if possible, he would like to bestow upon her the honorary title of special messenger. But due to the fact that she is a genius in the art of deception, she would just run away if he let her go on her own. And so he would just take her away. They rode in the carriage, and the Duke thought that she couldn't be trusted, and everything she said was a lie. Every expression on her face was a mask. He wasn't even sure if she was a real viper, and as soon as he had the chance, he would skin her. And then he asked her what her name was. She asked the question in surprise, but the Duke nodded his head and said yes, and took into account that neither James, who went door to door selling fake jewelry, nor Elizabeth, the teacher from the Empire, nor even the young merchant Johnny knew your name, to which she said he seemed really interested in her, to which he nodded his head. The Duke went on talking and said that the others didn't know about you at all, so it looks as if you would have to uncover many more of your deceptions. And she immediately replies that how interesting, it looks as if he, His Highness, is not as ignorant as people say. And he reflected that he had been told all this by Owen the butler, whereupon he asked again what her name was, but she never said, calling herself nothing, as she had no name, and no one had given her one. He asked if she had parents, and she didn't remember, saying that she didn't fall out of the sky. Someone gave birth to her. I wonder if she had lived in a normal family. Would she have thought about becoming a fraud? The Duke thought. And she continued that she was just lucky to live with the right people and not for long. The reason why she is hard to catch is because she is not registered anywhere in any country, and she has no papers. And she also added that she will stay with him and help in any way she can. So if he wants to give her a name, he can choose any name he wants. He asked if she would help him, and she said, why would she go with him to his estate if she wasn't going to be with him? He said he had no idea, and he didn't know what was going on in her little head. How would he know that she right now wasn't thinking a way to escape? But she said she changed her mind, and she had only known him through rumors before, and she didn't think she could trust and serve him, but he asked why she changed her mind. And she said she would never have thought he would think of everything and poison the food, also noting that he has an unwavering determination that sometimes you just need it. The protagonist still wants to know what she was poisoned with, saying that the same chiffon has a certain flavor, which made her think it was Peraltan. But the symptoms did not match. Then he said that she should not ask him about such things, and also that she should not be a fool, thinking that you would just tell her what you poisoned her with. After a little thought, she agreed. The Duke thought about what he could say, but he doesn't really want to. Even if she's just a criminal who doesn't know her rights, he wants her to help him. But he can't say that he secretly cast a spell on her, to which the protagonist interrupted his thoughts by saying to give her a name. But he also continued to think about her, that she was so young and quite pretty it was foolish of her to waste her mind on fraud. But without that talent, I would have to deal with a lot of problems myself. It would be hard for a beautiful commoner to live a normal life here in the Empire. He said he still needed time to come up with a name for her. However, he brought his hand up to her face, saying he didn't expect the genius con artist to be so beautiful. She continued to stare at him with her green eyes saying his name, but in a moment told him to stop trying to rip her face off, saying it was real. She continued, saying that caution and doubtfulness are very useful qualities and perhaps the most important to survive in the big city. They continued to ride in the carriage, but at some point the Duke felt a strange stinky smell, looking at the main character, which greatly embarrassed her. She laughed and said that she used the sewer to escape, which everyone used to crap in. He said that there was nothing to be done and asked to stop the carriage. They went into a clothing store where there were many dresses. He asked the saleswoman to show his hand on the left rack with dresses in the same second, and then said that all these dresses he buys. The Duke also said that all these dresses should be made to this girl's size. The protagonist stopped him, saying she had enough. But the Duke said it was impossible to live with one set of clothes, asking that she washed the same clothes all the time. But she asked him if he did the same. This surprised him greatly. The protagonist can't wear expensive clothes, and of course she washes them and puts them on again. He immediately asked sharply what she does with all the money she stole and what she spends it on, if not on clothes for herself. The protagonist has been providing for the orphanages since the day she was abandoned in a dark alley. There are a lot of sick people there, and they don't have money for medicine. She hasn't spent a dime on luxuries yet. He looked at her with a misunderstanding look and said that as long as she belongs to him, she doesn't have to worry about money. And if she needs anything, tell him. And he also asked that she was of such an age that she wanted such things. Didn't he? The protagonist nodded her head, saying that she did, but in her situation, she wouldn't dare to ask if he would really buy them for her, to which the Duke replied, of course. But she did not believe it and asked if she would really take it. The Duke replied that, of course, she could. From today, he would buy whatever she asked for, and asked her not to restrain herself and to go and choose the outfit she would wear now. She did not hesitate long. She pointed her finger at a beautiful pink dress and asked if she could have it. Whereupon the Duke gave orders that they should have it ready right away, as she would wear it now. The saleswoman took off the dress and said that she could go to a separate room to put it on. The protagonist did not want to say, but she had never worn such a thing, so she asked the saleswoman to help her, to which she apologized in surprise. But the Duke immediately said that it is so difficult and gave orders to help, to which she obediently showed her the room. While they were gone, the Duke thought about the main character, the fact that she looked scared and she was trying so hard to pick up words. He just couldn't believe that Viper was just a young, nameless girl from the orphanage, and the way she was surprised by the little gift. He realized that taking care of her was a good plan to earn her loyalty. He had been sitting and waiting for a long time. He wondered if women always took so long to put on one unfortunate dress. He began to think that she couldn't be trusted, and that whatever she said was a lie, as was every expression on her face. He was angry that so much time had passed. He jumped up from the couch and headed towards them. He opened the doors wide open and saw only the sales girl tied up with a knife at her throat. She was crying and begging for help. The Duke was angry that she had circled her again, and asked for an explanation of what had happened. And she explained that she had threatened her, and then ran away. He had already realized this, and asked for more details of what had happened when they went out the door. She began to tell how she had walked ahead of the girl, and suddenly she grabbed her and put a knife to her throat, and said that since they were alone here, she wanted to know something, where the outskirts of the city were, where there were not too many people, and where she should go, to which she replied, to the right of the boutique, there was a shopping street, the shortest way through it. She thanked her, left her with the knife at her throat, tied her hands together, and saying goodbye, reminded her that if she made one careless move, she would cut her throat, then left her. The Duke looked at the crying woman and thought that if Owen found out, he'd start thinking he was pathetic again. Then he found the prison knife. Thinking she'd stolen more than just the fork, he asked the sales clerk about the way through Paham, to which she said yes, he wanted to use magic again, not believing that she could go through Paham, the most unsafe street. And then he realized that if she continued like this, she would get further away. Then rolling up his sleeve, he used magic. The protagonist at the moment of escape, thinking how stupid he was that once again believed and fell for pity. She knew that no matter how much you think, the Emperor will not come out of it, no matter how hard you try. She continued to think that if she lost consciousness in a place like this, it's gone, and suddenly in front of her, a big man appeared, asking what here forgot noble lady. She realized that if she knew that something like this will happen, she would have put on something more comfortable. She wants to swing her foot between the man's legs, but suddenly she feels the same sensation as in the forest again. She thought that it is not like ordinary poison, More like some kind of magic. Is it possible that poison comes into effect when magic is used? She does not feel pain, but she does not feel her body either. She guessed that it would be there, but he did not tell her anything, so she had to get out on her own. The man bent down to the protagonist and asked her what was wrong with her and if she overestimated herself, knowing that she had a very nice outfit and seemed to be out of her mind, since she decided to crawl on the ground in the middle of the day when suddenly she started crawling, to which he started laughing very loudly, teasing her to run away. She thought he was strange. He sat down next to her and asked her what she was high on, noting that noblewomen were unlikely to buy the cheap dope they sold. He held out his hands to her and asked her if she had anything better, and thinking she still had something left, he started pawing at her, looking for the remnants of something, when suddenly a blow came and he fell back. Unable to get up, she turned her head and saw an angry Duke. He started yelling at her why she was lying there, whether she wanted to die or what. He just kept standing there, the protagonist pondering that it took her almost 20 minutes to get to this street from the boutique, and he had already caught up with her. The Duke walked up to this man, grabbed him by the head, and lifted him up against the wall. He started screaming. She also pondered how he could do that, and with one hand, he started to break his arms, but she told him to stop. She knew he would. That's why she tried to stop him, but he said he wouldn't lose the ring. And suddenly it hit her, as long as she was wearing the ring, she wouldn't run away. She said that she thought so she took him with her just in case, and asking if he had accidentally used a spell. He said he had, and she asked if she could not run away now, but he said she knew the answer. The protagonist agreed and thanked him for coming so quickly. Joking that she would have stained her dress a little more, he asked if she was going to run away again. But the protagonist replied that she wasn't going to. She didn't even hope she could do anything when she ran away this time. Now knowing she was under a spell, she wouldn't do anything stupid. But he kept looking at her without saying anything. She was very confused and asked why he was staring at her like that. Then he picked her up and carried her back. She apologized and said she could go on her own, also apologizing for running away. He said that her foot would not touch the ground until they reached the manor, and she'd better not make a move, to which she obediently stopped resisting, thinking that she did not want to end up like that fellow. And now they were near the door to the mansion. She was surprised that he carried her all the way to the gate. The butler asked why they were so late, to which the Duke replied that he ran after her all the time and that she was hard to catch. She asked to be lowered to the ground, for the blood came to her head, and she was in pain. She stood on the ground and, looking quietly at the butler, heard him say, "Welcome to the estate of the great Duke of Hesse," calling her a master of deceit and a viper. He asked Owen to bring the contract, to which he immediately brought it and laid it before the protagonist, introducing himself as Owen Schwatch, the man in charge of all the affairs of the manor, and she immediately asked if he had thought of casting spells on her. He agreed and said he was sorry he had to use force. The butler was experienced enough, but not enough to foresee all her tricks. She knew that, and the first and foremost rule of a perfect con is, carefully hide your emotions and carefully watch your surroundings. His eyes and demeanor told her that this man was no ordinary butler, and the plan to cast the spell belonged to him, not the great Duke. The protagonist politely asked if he could tell her how to undo this spell. He surprisingly replied that if there was a way, she would be the first to know about it because it was ancient magic, a method used to prevent slaves from escaping. There was no way to undo it, short of the death of the slave or his master, and also asked her to make sure she didn't think of something like, "Then I'll just kill Van Hesse's Rexid." Magic allows the master's blood to flow through the body of his slave, and if the master passes away, the blood running through the slave's veins will instantly dry up, and he hopes he doesn't need to explain what happens next. She reacted in surprise, to which the Duke snapped at Owen, calling him a jerk, and that he was crazy, and that he wasn't talking about this effect of the spell. She's starting to realize what he is, besides not being too smart. He has a soft spot when it comes to death row inmates, prisoners. He holds all the cards. So, no matter what he orders her to do, she'll have no choice but to obey, and yet she didn't expect him to be so upset. Owen said that the Duke would not have used it if he had told him, and then he would not have caught Miss Viper, and His Highness's plan would have failed before it began. He asked why there were so many madmen around him, to which Owen replied that he had always wished his lands prosperous and safe. He turned to the main character and called her a criminal, saying that didn't she know that Count Shuji, whom she had tricked, had committed suicide because his luck had turned away from him. Baron Fallow and Baron Shutton sold their titles after their investments went sour because they believed you. He also asked if she knew that they were beaten to death when they tried to work off their debts by working as servants. She grinned and said, "That's how it is." Owen asked not to be surprised because, of course, they all deserve to die. Count Shugi ran an illegal slave market, and the two barons were part owners of a huge casino, though he thinks she knows all about that. Everyone that Miss Viper robbed used their money to skirt the law, which the Duke agreed to. They all died. However, that didn't mean that Ms. Viper's crimes would suddenly be forgiven, nor did Ms. Viper pull this whole thing off just to pass as a hero. To which she replied that of course not. I was just picking people so that I wouldn't feel too much guilt later. If the world was a good place with no bad guys, everyone could just live without any worries. Miss Viper, Owen said she was wanted 4 years ago and had been sentenced to death for countless crimes, but luckily for her, His Highness Rex Van Hesse decided to reward her with a chance to live the life of an honest citizen rather than a vicious offender. The Grand Duke and the estate staff would treat her as a business partner. Once she signed the contract, she would agree to help His Highness ascend to the throne at any cost, and of course she would sign it. She mumbled that she felt like the head of staff in the Blue House. She was also glad that the day had come when she would sign such a dishonest contract. Almost putting the agreement in place, the butler stopped her. Owen asked if she wanted to read the contract more carefully. The contents can't be changed, although we can add something if she wants, for example, regarding payment, but she immediately said, annual renewable contract with a blank check, salary with a limit of 1 billion Nort, and they will pay any extra expenses during the work. There is nothing else to discuss, she said. He asked in surprise when she had time to read all this. He thought she would just sign it without looking at it. She had only picked up on the most important things, and suddenly the Duke started to hurry her up, telling her to sign it already. But she also wanted to add something to the contract. He kept listening. She said that if she proved her usefulness, but at some point her services would be needed by him, she asked to break the contract. She remembered that she was under a spell, and what should she do if he continues to treat her like a slave, even after he becomes emperor? He indignantly said that he is not that dishonest. They met at least 24 hours ago. How can she trust him? She wants to be free of the contract once it is broken. Rex Van Hesse will no longer activate the spell, and to achieve a fair fulfillment of the terms of the contract. Both parties will vouch with their lives. They will sign a contract for life made of the purest Eisenbach Mena. The contract takes the life of the signer as a guarantee of fulfillment. If he wants to be emperor, he must have one. The protagonist asked if he had one, to which he said he didn't think she would know about it. He said he did, and Owen tried to stop him, but he said it wasn't his place to make a mess after he stole someone's life and didn't even warn him. She was glad for the Duke's slack and asked if he agreed, to which he said yes, saying it was the least he could do, and he didn't want to treat her like a slave, however. He hoped it would be done well. He didn't want to be disappointed in her. She called herself an expert, to which he asked to follow him. They went to the Duke's treasure room. She couldn't take her eyes off the amount of treasures in there. He couldn't even believe it. He asked if she wanted any of it. He was sure she had already noticed that this treasure room was enchanted. If she tried to break in here, the magic would activate. She shouldn't even think about breaking in here and dying. She asked if he was serious. He said he didn't need it anyway. It was a relief for her. He turned around and wondered how much jewelry she was wearing. She smiled and said it was better he didn't know for his own good. They approached the contract, and she asked if he was sure if he wanted to spend it on her. He said it didn't matter as it was useless. She wondered if the Duke really didn't care about material possessions or power. A man who had everything and wanted nothing. Why would he suddenly want to become emperor? And suddenly he asked her to come over. He put the contract inside the circle. He took the dagger and said that they needed to activate the contract. He also said that this notch had to be filled with the blood of both parties to the contract. She kept saying that she didn't expect him not to change his mind. But he said that wasn't the point. To fill the notch, the incision would have to be deep. He also hoped that she wouldn't be bothered by the scar on her arm. She came up surprised and asked, since he wants to become emperor, hasn't he earned the place by killing soldiers and knights on the battlefield? If his lordship is so gentle, there will be problems with that. Maybe if he has to girls, children, maybe he has to kill even old men. He will hesitate like that even then. He took the dagger. He said it's different. He's sure he won't flinch. But by nature, it's hard for him to look at his own blood. If you think about it, they don't have to shed the same amount of blood. He made a deep incision in himself and asked for his hand, and then he injected his finger, and that was enough to seal the deal. After which he mumbled that that was it, after which she said that was some primitive way to sign such an expensive contract. The Duke said that since it was all done, she trusted that he wasn't going to make her his slave. And if possible, I'd like to trust you too, Owen said. That since even heaven has two sides, no one can be trusted so easily, and she pointed out that he has a very smart butler. Since he is nowhere without him, he said to focus on starting to trust each other. Since the contract now binds their lives together, he trusts her, so don't even let her try to fool him. After that, she teasingly said that she wasn't afraid of him hearing, "No, I'm going to fool you." She got indignantly angry. She smilingly said that she understands, and it's up to him to believe her or not. He wants to believe her, but is there still something she is hiding from him? He gives her a chance to put it out there as it is. She took a long time to think and stumped him. He already thought there was more to it, whereupon she started to peel her mask off her face, and there she was, the real one, with pink hair on her head, and even prettier. She asked if she was cuter like that. She always tried to make the mask better quality than her real face, but it never works. He immediately asked if she was a girl at all, and she jokingly asked if he wanted to make sure. He said scared she was crazy and asked her to just tell him, whereupon she said she was a girl. She asked not to anger him. The last time she showed herself to someone without a mask was at the age of 6. He asked if she had lived like that since such a young age, to which the protagonist replied that it was just a precaution. Her face changed as she got older, so she had to hide it. He said in surprise, he said that means she could just change her face to start her shenanigans again. To which she said yes, but that's her real face. He asked if there was something else. Wasn't there? And she smilingly said she almost forgot. She started to take off her lenses, saying that she was so used to them that she had already forgotten. He came closer, started to feel her face, asking if she was hiding anything else. The heroine said that nothing else. The protagonist, laying on the bed, began to look at the rings that she stole from the treasury. The Duke, looking at it, asked if she really liked them so much. She quite answered that very much, and jokingly said why he had not kidnapped her before. He added that if she wanted something, he would take her to the treasury. She asked what she would have to do, but he said that they would discuss it after lunch, as suddenly 2 servants came in. They brought lunch to the protagonist. The female servant rejoiced that the young Duke finally had a bride. He had lived alone for so long and finally found such a beautiful bride. The Duke said that it was not so, remembered Owen, who apparently did not tell them anything. The main character introduced herself as Rosica. They met, and the servant was called Masha. She was the Duke's nanny when he was still living in the imperial palace. It had been 10 years since they came here to Drax. He was 15. He also introduced the bearded cook, her son. At first he worked as a chef in the palace, but 3 years ago he decided to come here. The main character wondered why Masha called the Duke young gentleman. But then Masha came over and said that he is not too interested in women. So she was surprised that he brought a lady to visit, and the cook added that he thought he had a problem with down there. They continued chatting about the Duke, and the protagonist at that moment heard what Masha said about Duke Ride's brother. And she immediately realized that he was the first in line for elimination. And suddenly Masha cried, and her son let out the door and asked to call when they finished. The heroine asked if they knew what he was up to. But the Duke said that she did not cry because of that, and asked to close the subject while they were eating, saying that he would tell about everything after dinner. The previous emperor and empress had 4 children. The first, the current emperor, Robert van Hexen. The second, Grand Duke Ride van Hexen. And the third child, Duchess Rachel Prania. And the fourth, Grand Duke Rexid van Hesse. The first son, Robert van Hesse, easily got the throne. The second son, Ride, is now helping the current emperor to strengthen and expand the empire. Rachel is living her quiet life as the Duchess of Prania. And the last but less important son, Rexid van Hesse, who is much younger than his siblings, and why all of a sudden he decided to muddy the waters, the heroine thought. The main character said if he wants to become emperor, doesn't he need to defeat the other 2 contenders, the Crown Prince and Grand Duke Ride? He agreed. She went on to say that starting with the second in line, Grand Duke Ride, he can just be convinced to give up his claim to the throne. She wanted to get by with as little bloodshed as possible, so she hoped that he would just give up willingly, but Rexid said that even she would have a hard time pulling something like that off, because he sleeps and sees how to put the emperor in the coffin. Even if he misses that, the bigger problem is the Crown Prince. He can't just give up his position, and he has the support of the people. She was sorry to admit it, but he would have to either kill the Crown Prince or announce that he was dead and secretly send him away. Of course, in that case, they would have to take precautions like mutilating him somehow, but he interrupted by saying that there was no need for that. He opened the doors, which immediately smelled cold. They walked forward and saw something covered in front of them. The temperature of the room was artificially lowered by magical stones. She also smelled parsia. It is a substance used to prevent the rotting of animal carcasses. The heroine turned to His Highness to make sure she understood him correctly. He said there was no need to kill the Crown Prince, and suddenly he pulled the sheet off, saying she was right. Pointing at the dead brother, he said he was already dead. The Crown Prince and I are the same age. As long as he was in the palace, they relied on each other a lot. He was a pampered and soft child who considered him his best friend. He had no idea that Rexid was hiding his claws. In order to meet him, he came to Drax very often. That was the case this time, and he decided this was his chance. And the Duke said, now you know everything and you can make an emperor assassin and not feel guilty about it. He immediately asked if she was afraid of him, to which she said no. The Duke continued his monologue without letting her speak. He said that she now realizes that she was kidnapped by a crazy bastard who put a knife to the throat of her innocent friend. She tried to say something, but he immediately said that she can't escape. She knows that. But she did manage to say that he wanted the protagonist to be afraid of him or worried that she wouldn't believe him, and he was afraid of that. And if you think about it, she had already seen him lie. She didn't become a con artist because of her hard life. She started doing it to make easy money. She was born with it, and she feels as if cheating can even be called her instinct. Whatever man you bring to her, she will be able to determine his psychotype in 3 minutes. She has already realized what kind of man His Highness is. If there was anything she was wrong about, it was that she thought that he wants to become emperor, but he doesn't. He asked in surprise, but she said she should have been more specific. He doesn't want to become emperor. He wants revenge. The Duke laughed out loud and asked who he wants revenge for, and she thinks it's the Crown Prince. He was surprised to ask why, because if he wanted to become emperor, he had to kill him. Obviously, he had killed him. What kind of revenge are we talking about? And why is she so eager to continue this useless dialogue? Some kind of evaluation of deductive powers, said the Duke. But the protagonist, that it's a kind of check if the goods he paid his money for are not defective. But that's not what he meant. But the protagonist interrupted him, saying that when she meets people for the first time, she assigns them a level. The most important thing in successful fraud is to know the highest, whatever the moment of reason and desire, he chooses reason. The middle, if is well treated, desire will win over reason, and the lowest level, a person very easily tempted by desire. But even though the heroine cheated everyone, there is one level that she doesn't touch. This is the one who trusts people despite their toughness and guile. Those who could be fooled even by unprofessional swindlers, simply put, simpletons. Only someone who sold his conscience a long time ago would choose such a person. It's so bad that even the feeling of guilt starts to wake up. And she pointed her finger at His Highness, saying that it was him. The type like him are usually kind to the extreme. He said that she makes estimates knowing him only one day, but in response, she said that it is enough for her. The answer comes by itself looking at just one thing: how you treat me, a criminal sentence to death. Rexit is a type of man who is infinitely kind to his people. He won't cut the throat of someone he trusts. Besides, he thinks they can always have his back. He probably knows himself that he trusts those he wants to trust very easily. So this is how he tries to establish trust. On the advice of his clever butler, he doesn't trust her for anything. And he thinks that the wise choice is to show her his despotic character. And if the Duke is capable of killing the innocent Crown Prince, then go up now and bring her the heads of Mashy and Marco. Because you can't leave any evidence. She thinks he can't. So don't let him pretend to be strong. It doesn't suit him. He asked if she believed him that he didn't kill the Crown Prince. But even though he says he wants to become emperor, it was strange that she didn't see his reasons for that at all. The Duke never said what he would do after becoming emperor. But it seems the heroine now understands the Duke has no lust for power, no greed, and no particular purpose in life. But because of the death of your man, which was the Crown Prince, he has one goal: revenge. She knows that he didn't kill him, but others don't know. The first in line to the throne of the empire, the Crown Prince died, while no one but someone who killed him and other people in this huge castle knows about the death of Crown Prince Raven Ben Hexen. But somehow Rexit had the body, in which case the first place you should start is by getting him off a false charge of murdering the Crown Prince, which is what he had instructed the heroine to do from the beginning. He had to live quietly. The palace was worried that he would damage his image, so they ordered him to be banished as a boy to a distant frontier, and there he lived quietly and tried his best not to defame the name of the imperial family. But when he returned, he only got the death of his best friend, the Crown Prince, and became a suspect in his murder. The heroine said that they might be in trouble if he was suspected of murder and sent to the gallows before he became emperor. Her life is his life. He understands that, she asked with a wink. But then she put her hand on the Duke and said not to worry. She always earns her worth. The next day, the heroine is running through the castle with some papers, and suddenly the butler appeared behind her, and he had a knife near her neck. He asked who she was and how she got in here. Suddenly, a passing Duke noticed this and started yelling at him to let her go. He let her go abruptly. He said it was a mistake. The Duke came running up and asked if everything was all right. The butler started apologizing again and said he couldn't let go of someone who had broken into His Highness's room early in the morning. The Duke angrily started running after him, scolding him. He apologized again to the Lady Viper and said he acted on instinct. She said it was okay. And it was an obvious reaction when he was in assassin school. It was the girls who were the most capable assassins, and they were all also very beautiful. The heroine asked about assassins. The butler said that even careful men sleeping with a knife under their pillow were powerless against his classmates. Amazing, isn't it? He said. Also, he doesn't believe in beautiful women. Viper knew that the butler was an unusual man, but he did have a grand past. He was very surprised when such a beautiful stranger showed up at His Highness's castle. He came closer, asking again to apologize, but she only said that he should rather be praised for it. His Highness's life is his life, so he'd hoped she would take good care of him in the future. He also apologized for being rude, but he really wanted to check if it was a real face. But the Duke came up and said it was real. He had already checked it. The heroine laughed and said she thought he would tear her cheeks off. The Duke asked if the heroine had anyone who had a grudge against her. She didn't understand the question much. He thought his question was stupid. After all, she had been in the fraud business for so long that they probably couldn't even be counted. She agreed and wondered why he was asking. He immediately replied aggressively, to kill them before they take his tactician's life. She didn't understand the sudden aggression. He wasn't cold enough to kill everyone indiscriminately. She was a con artist, so only her victims could be disgruntled with her. He asked that it wasn't the first time she had been in such a situation when a knife was put to her throat. Her expression when the knife was put to her throat. It spoke for itself. It wasn't like the face of a confused person in a dangerous situation. As if she had been one step away from death countless times, she immediately remembered how she had actually died in such a way. He was right, and she could not worry, because those who had put her in danger then were not in this world now, and neither were those who knew her real appearance. But from this day on, there are 4 of you, and they don't have to worry. And she wanted to leave, saying that she would go to work to complete the task he had given her. She wouldn't have all day, but the Duke stopped her, reminding her of the wound, and told her to go to his room. He would treat it. He could kill those simple wounds, but she refused, saying that she could deal with it herself, and thanking him she left. The butler remarked that it was no wonder why she walked around with a mask on her face, because once you see such a beauty you never forget. But the Duke immediately asked angrily what he had done to say, "Beautiful, beautiful," where he had sold his wits. The Duke remembered a passage when he was standing there talking to his brother, and he was telling him how jealous he was. He asked who he was looking at when he said that he wasn't talking about the poor people of his lands who worked all day to feed themselves. He said about them, at least they were free. They didn't have to live their lives worrying about other people's opinions. They don't have to follow boring rules of etiquette and point swords at people they care about. They can sleep well knowing that nothing will happen to them. Rex asked why he couldn't sleep well, asking if anyone had threatened him and asking who. He would tear him to pieces, but his brother just said that he was really having a hard time. He thought he had held up well so far, but he was having a really hard time. The Duke came up to him and put his hand on his head, calling him a fool who had become so arrogant. If he started living like a commoner, he wouldn't last a day. Immediately running away to the palace, he thanked him with a laugh and said he had to go, and yet it had been so long since they had seen each other. He felt so light at heart again. If Rex had had a more gentle nature, why was he such an idiot? Not once asking what made him feel so heavy, how could he help him? But it was too late for regrets. Raven was dead, or rather he had been killed. And suddenly the butler came up, disturbing his memories. He asked if there was no news from the crown prince, who had gone on vacation for a long time. The imperial court would quickly guess that something was wrong here. But he said she would think of something. After all she had promised, she said she wanted to look at Raven's handwriting. So the Duke had given her some letters she and he had exchanged. So that was what she was taking out of Rex's room, but why would she need them, the butler asked. But he didn't understand it himself. But the butler went on to say that she was not to be trusted, and he also asked to ask her what she was doing or even talk to her in front of him, for starters. Since they were all in the same boat, he shouldn't forget the butler's words. Even if he would believe everyone in this world, no way would he believe her. This is a frightening woman, the Duke thought about it. He remembered how she had thanked him for her beautiful name, Rosica. It was the first time anyone had given it to her. She would treasure it, though he had said there was no way he would trust her. He always worked out his worth. But perhaps he had broken his word. And then night came. They were all gathered in the hall. The butler saw her and called her Viper. But she interrupted him and asked him how long he would call her that. If anyone heard, they would all know at once that she was a criminal swindler. He smiled and said that she was right, and asked how he should call her. But suddenly the Duke spoke, who said Rosica. The butler apologized and obeyed. Rosica asked the Duke why there are no servants here, but he said there have always been only 4 people in this palace because he doesn't need anyone's help and he doesn't like the noise. She said, why don't you hire servants for the size of this castle? It is so big after all. But it doesn't give any impression. There should be about 50 people here. The butler asked in surprise for the number. She said 10 for the kitchen, 10 for cleaning, 10 for laundry, and another 10 to give them errands. The palace is big, but not big enough to need that many people, the butler said. And as she had just heard, His Highness doesn't like crowds, but the Duke has to do as she says. She went on to say 10 people should be chosen from the lower nobility, and there should also be servants in higher positions. He agreed with everything, and she also asked if it was possible to give her some title. She will have a lot of work to do to make His Highness Rex the Emperor. She can't be in the shadows all the time. The heroine needs to have the authority to personally step forward and clear the way. The butler asked what she was going to do, but she is still thinking about it. Rosica is not cooperating with the bandit from the alley. But with the man who will become the emperor, he really thinks that she can think of the whole plan so quickly. He stopped thinking that she is very suspicious, no matter what plans she is talking about, but maybe she thinks that she caught a simpleton. The butler asked for the letters she had taken yesterday. He wanted to know how she was going to use them, but she said she would have indigestion, thus refusing. The Duke said he was as talkative as a parrot today. They were eating, after all, and told him not to be annoying and asked next time. Rosica added that if he was so interested, he could come to her room later, and agreed and was silent. He still thought they had paid a colossal sum for her, so they should check everything properly. He didn't believe her. He came into her room after dinner and wondered if she was upset about the incident with the knife yesterday and thought she was doing it on purpose, commanding him all the time. She asked for the fact that he was an assassin. He was fast and smart. He had a good speech. He took it as a compliment. She asked her his height. He was 182. She asked her his weight. He asked why she was interested. But she said it would be worth it to lose 3 more pounds. But he was happy with his figure. But she said he could get better once they were done. Owen didn't know what she was talking about, but she suddenly told him to take off his clothes. The story takes us to the Duke, who was looking for something in the cellar and remembering that Rosica asked him to find the Crown Prince's letters. He saw them on the shelf next to him. He went to them. Thinking that he had no one else to correspond with, he took one of the letters in his hands and read. Rex, it seems that spring has already come. The tulips are blooming in the palace garden. You know that in the language of flowers they mean a declaration of love. No, I don't think you do. It's hard to expect you to be so sensual. Anyway, when men fall in love with a woman, they give her tulips as a confession. And before I die, I'd like to see you do it too. Then he read another. Rex, you got my letter, didn't you? You did, didn't you? Is everything all right? I can't figure out why exactly you have to go suppress the rebels from that little kingdom. Rex, for some reason today is the day I really, really want to see you. Well, to see the face of someone as important as you, I have to go myself. I'll come to you soon. I have a lot of things I want to tell you. And then he saw the letter. Rex, how's it going lately? Are you doing okay? You know, it's really hard for me. The older I get, the more confused I get because I feel like the world I knew is falling apart. I really miss the times when you and I lived in the Imperial Palace. Rex, good, I'm doing okay. I'm just wondering. The Duke thought him a fool. He had put his whole soul into this letter and was crying out how hard it was for him. And what was his answer to it? He wondered if such a letter was there too. He read, Rex, it's me. Are you all right? I'm no longer suffering and sad here. I'm very happy. But I'm a little sad that you'll be alone. I hope you won't be sad about my death for too long, because I wish you happiness. Please be happy until the day we meet again. He was sure he had written it. It was his handwriting. He stood there shocked and did not understand what was going on. Where did these letters come from? Suddenly, Rosica appeared behind him and asked what was wrong. But he went up to her and asked her how she did it, when and how she got this letter. He asked her to tell him. He begged. But suddenly a butler appeared with a letter in his hands and calling her unbelievable. He said he didn't expect to see the Duke here. He asked why he was looking so tense. He went to the butler. He said it was amazing. He looked like his brother, but he didn't say anything. He hugged him. Did he really think the Crown Prince had risen from the dead? Or maybe he just missed him. The Duke was surprised when the heroine pulled off her mask, revealing that it was the butler. He asked then where the letter came from. She said she wrote it to help him, and she wasn't going to play a joke on him. She needed to copy the handwriting of His Highness the Crown Prince. He said nothing and took his head and said he was shoehorned in like some boy. They stood on the balcony and watched the Duke smoking. Suddenly the butler said that he hadn't smoked for a long time, and now he was taking up the old habit again. It seemed to be a very strong shock to him. And why did she only write such a letter? Owen asked, but she regretted it, but she had to see if she could copy the handwriting to fool even His Majesty. But thinking about it now, it seemed unnecessary. She didn't think it was that serious. They were born in the same year in the Imperial Palace and spent their entire childhood together. After the master arrived in the Draxlands, His Highness the Crown Prince visited them often. They treated each other with all sincerity, as could be seen by the way they exchanged letters nonstop. So when the Crown Prince died, the master fell into apathy. And as if for bad luck everything happened, it was on the way to the Draxlands that the Duke was in charge of. Rosica believed that someone had set it up to falsely accuse His Highness of killing the crown prince. At first, he didn't care about the false accusation or anything else. He wasn't himself. The heroine thought that now the situation wasn't much different, and he was only pretending as if everything was fine. But in fact, he still hadn't gotten rid of the thoughts of his friend's death. The butler asked if she knew why her master kept standing in front of that particular birch tree. She asked why. He told her when he first came to Drax. It was the first gift His Highness the Crown Prince brought with him, a birch sapling. He had heard they planted it together. The butler told her she couldn't bring herself to take it now for remorse. She wondered if it was all a bit strange when she was running a scam and ruining entire families, when she was completely wasting someone's fortune earned by sweat and blood. The heroine never felt anything that could be called remorse, and really, it never happened, she thought. It's strange, very strange. The Duke was smoking another cigarette when suddenly Rosica came up to him. He asked her what she wanted, but she only said that he could go on smoking. But he didn't want it anymore, even though it was summer now, that it was rather cold here in the evenings. She was only wearing a dress, he said. She said, because she couldn't apologize properly, and she apologized, saying she didn't mean to joke with him. But he knows, and he's not acting like that because he's mad at her, and told her to go inside, but she just kept standing there. But he once again told her to go, continuing that if she caught a cold, she wouldn't function properly, but she still remained silent. As suddenly he took off his jacket and told her to put it on. She said that if he had seen him for the last time, those were the very words he had been told by him. And if it upset him, then she was very, very sorry. But he, looking at the birch tree, said it was all right, and she repeated that she was really sorry. The Duke said she was better than him after all. She had never met him or talked to him. But she knows Raven even better than him. It seems he cried when he wrote the last letter. He asked in surprise that she even realized that. She remained silent. The Duke thought and realized that he didn't even answer that letter. And not only that, he never once tried to understand him or comfort him. She suddenly asked what he was like. He thought about it and answered, Raven Van Hexen, the older brother. He was his best friend. Though sometimes he was like his younger brother, who he wanted to protect. He was too warm and gentle and kind. He cried a lot, the heroine thought so. You can tell by looking at the letters alone. He continued by saying that his mother died a few days after he was born. So he grew up without much attention and love. Raven had Her Majesty the Empress, the same Empress that is still the Empress now. Unlike him, he could call someone father and mother. He was very jealous of it then, although he tried to hide it. But it seems he figured it out around the age of 6. He started calling his father His Majesty the Emperor and his mother Her Majesty the Empress. She asked him if it was true at the age of 6, to which he said yes. Apparently, he felt sorry for him. And also, Raven was incredibly afraid of his father, the previous emperor, but even so, when he was scolded, he was sure to come and confess everything to be scolded and not only the Duke. And he also cried. He lied, saying that he was the one who suggested that he go play and skip classes. Yes, still he should have studied, not kicking a ball, he thought. The protagonist asked what was so hard about it, but he went on to say that he was incredibly kind. He didn't know how he knew. But every time he was in pain, he would come and stand by him. It surprised him, come to think that Raven never left him, so he never once had a hard time. He wondered if he was really the one who couldn't do anything for him. You could see how hard it was for him. But he never once comforted him. The Duke always thought he could protect him with his power, but apparently he was mistaken. When he was dying like this, he was completely unaware of anything, and he wondered if she knew what was tormenting him the most right now. He would be better off if he hated him, but he would rather die than blame someone else. Rosica agreed. His Highness the Crown Prince is just such a man, she said. She thought he would say all the same things she had written in that letter. He said it would be good to have someone like her around. Before he died, she would be able to understand how much he was suffering and why he was having such a hard time, and she could talk to him just as affectionately. He let out tears and said he was going mad and thought he was being an idiot. She came and wiped away his tears and told him that he had better think that His Highness the Crown Prince had wished and now wished him happiness. And as he was a kind and gentle man, he would not wish you to avenge him. For so you would inevitably be in danger, and she was not going to say that he should give up revenge. She rather wanted him to stop blaming himself for his death, and asked him to fulfill His Highness the Crown Prince's last wish. His last wish was for him to be happy. If Rex's heart would only rest after revenge was accomplished, then so be it. She asked him what it would take to make him happy. If he wanted to catch a criminal, drag him to hell, and lock him up there forever, let him do what he wanted. But if he wanted to fulfill his cherished wish instead of the Crown Prince, then he could do that too. That's why he took her with him. There was nothing she couldn't do. The next day, Rosica was notified that Lady Rosica will be given the title represented by the direct relatives of the Duke of Drax. the princess, who is the first in line to inherit the place of the head of the Drax family. Originally, this title was to be given to either the sister of the head of the family or his daughter, but the Duke does what he wants. But the protagonist refused to do it. She doesn't want to. He asked why, thinking it would put pressure on her. Because after you make him emperor, you'll have to go back to cheating. She thought, what a smart guy he is. But she said, no, it just seems too strange. All of a sudden, you have a successor. And it's a man living on the battlefield 365 days a year. And not a man, but a woman. But the butler interrupted, saying that giving her the title of low noblewoman out of nowhere is also pretty strange. Obviously, it will make everyone think what Rexit is up to. But making the woman the heiress sounds like the most logical move for him. Because Rexit has absolutely no interest in marriage. It's known all over the world, not just in the imperial palace. Needless to say, he's not just not interested, but rather even hates it. If a man who hasn't even married appoints a successor who can't be replaced, the occasional rumors of a wedding will also dwindle. Everyone will assume that the master who doesn't like things that bore him made the most logical choice. She supposes so. And the fact that His Highness, who literally lived on the battlefield, suddenly made a woman his successor will be seen by others as an attempt to shut the place up. He has agreed, and though the creation of a successor seems too sudden, it suits the silly Archduke who doesn't like to be bothered. At least, that's what they will tell the public. The butler also pointed out that the title of princess suited her role best, and there was no need to feel pressured about it, because after they were done with the case, the Duke would kick her out of the family, and then he would be emperor. So if she wanted to, he would re-gift her any title she wanted. A good offer for her, because there's no place safer than a princess. She agreed and signed it, and then she joked that he would take care of her by calling him daddy. But he thought she was crazy. Then she thought he was only 4 years older than her, so she called him brother. The next day, the Duke was looking at the plan of the main character. He saw his name and all the details, then suddenly she appeared, and began to wipe everything, a little worried that he did not see something bad about himself. She asked if Alan sent a letter to the palace. But he said that after receiving her letter, the procession from the Imperial Palace to the Draxlands will take about 2 months. They agreed to just take and summon the Imperial Knights here. But she's not worried for the same plan, especially to show them the living crown prince. She also plans to invite the nobles of the northern region. So he should take that into consideration. Even though she will be the heiress in name only, they can't help but announce the appearance of the princess to everyone, she agreed. The main character asked why he wasn't getting married. He asked why she was interested. She said it was important because marriage was not uncommon for diplomatic purposes, and since he wanted to become emperor, it would be good for him. He had no particular reason for it. He had never met anyone, and he never liked anyone. Usually aristocrats marry early for many reasons, to revive the family or to improve their position. Even if you meet true love, if you don't fit the other conditions, it will be difficult to consummate the marriage. So there are a lot of aristocrats in the government, and even more so in the imperial family, but she doesn't understand what the reason is that the crown prince stayed single for his 25 years. But the Duke said he had a girlfriend he loved, but she probably wasn't fit to be an empress, and yet he wasn't the kind of man who would leave her and make another woman his wife. Well, he thinks he had a lot of other things causing him heartache besides that. Obviously, His Highness the Crown Prince had more than 1 or 2 things causing him headaches, so she suspected that maybe he wouldn't marry for a similar reason.